What is going on between the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson? We talk about Lamar Jackson's injury, the future of the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson, continuing to recap the Ravens' Week 16 win over the Falcons, and more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back and welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostraker of Ravens Wire, and we are here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today and making us your first listen. We're free and available on all platforms, including over on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL general manager and managing your football franchise, this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. So our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game. We're back, midweek edition episode, and here with us, Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown, usually Taco Tuesday, but we'll make it Taco Wednesday today and have that be the thing. But we'll talk about a bunch of different topics today. But Spencer, I want to get into Lamar Jackson and just everything that's going on with him, especially injury-wise. We'll talk about injuries in the first segment, get more into general Lamar Jackson talk in the second segment. But with his injury, obviously, he had the sprained PCL in the Denver game. We haven't seen him since then. There was a report by Adam Schefter. He could be back by the Christmas Eve game. Obviously, we are past Christmas Eve as we're headed into Week 17. The Ravens have been super tight-lipped about the situation. He was asked, John Harbaugh, about if Lamar is going to practice this week. He said, we'll see. And where are you right now with everything going on with the situation? Do you feel like, based off of anything, just gut feelings or anything you've heard, if the Ravens will see Lamar Jackson either in Week 17 or maybe it's Week 18 or maybe just come playoff time? What's your read on the situation?
I would assume that Jackson doesn't play against the Steelers and they err on the side of caution with his contract looming and with the playoffs looming. I get it. I get you want the division title. It's a goal that you set out to be the best in your division. You want to beat the teams in your division. But with the playoffs already locked up, it kind of doesn't have the same luster. Home field advantage, Vegas has seen as much less of a advantage over the last couple of years. Maybe COVID had an impact for that, but it used to be a 3-point swing. Now it's been a little bit more of a 1.5-point swing. And playoffs are already locked up. So the difference is you playing the first round at home and then going on the road if you win in all likelihood. So that is something that is worthwhile, but at the same time, is it something that is so worthwhile that you want to get a dynamic athlete back out before he feels 100% ahead of the playoffs? So maybe we see him in Week 18. And again, you do want to win your division. You do want that home game. It does make a little less travel as opposed to going on the road 1, 2, 3, 4 times and expecting to go do that, which, hey, the Ravens have done it before, but ultimately, it's feels like, err on the side of caution. They do want to get him reps, though, so it's tough. It's tough finding that balance. You don't know with how much we don't know how much swelling could be in his knee or what it is or how minor it is or how much treatment he's gotten or any of those various factors. So they definitely want to get the reps. They want timing. It feels like they've started to get a little bit more rhythm. Okay, they bring in Sammy Watkins, Deshaun Jackson's playing snaps here and there, keep staying around that 20 snap threshold, 15 to 25 snaps. And then, working in DeMarcus Robinson a ton. He's getting a ton of run. Those 2 tight ends and Likely and Andrews as well. So you want those reps. You also want Dobbins and Edwards to get their reps with Jackson, who hasn't really gotten to click all the way through, and how good they were at the mesh point at times in 2020 and with Edwards 2018 and 2019. So those are important. But then again, to just kind of continue playing devil's advocate, I guess, and dance around this answer a bit, Jackson's in year 5 of with this team and with some of these guys, year 4 of Greg Roman's offense. The reps you want, he's played, it's not like he didn't play the entire season. So it might be a little bit of rust there, but I don't know. When the playoffs get going, it's feels like a different kind of team. Do they have a ton of playoff experience? Not necessarily, but they're also not green like they were in 2019. They played a couple games after. They've acquired some veterans, Marcus Williams and some other veterans as well that have been around and been in the playoffs. So I think that, it's tough. They just have to try to find that balance. Can you get a couple reps in And can you also make sure that he feels good? It feels like he will imminently play in the playoffs. He is not done for the season, and playoffs are the main goal here when you already have it locked up. So I would err on the side of we don't see him Sunday night. We're unsure of if he'll practice at all this week. It might be nice to maybe get him a limited session here or there, but it sounds like he was on a treadmill from what Ian Rappaport said, and they haven't really tested his lateral ability in terms of movement skill yet so far. So I think we probably see him not this week, maybe next week, and definitely the week after.
Right. You don't want to rush him back, but you want him back on the field. But you have to play both sides of that where no one's 100% right now, but you have to be careful with this, definitely. And if you're going to get him back for the playoffs, I'd probably agree with you in the fact that maybe we don't see him against Pittsburgh, but he's back for Cincinnati. But Spencer, we've seen the offense now with Tyler Huntley, even dating back to last season. What does Lamar Jackson's insertion back into this 2022 offense do for the Ravens? And how does it change things around? Where does it improve this offense?
Well, Lamar Jackson can simply push the ball downfield a lot more than Tyler Huntley can. And Huntley finally made a couple nice throws and was able to push the ball to Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews lined up isolated against A.J. Terrell, takes a nice little speed release, able to push the ball, also got creative, flipped one to Sammy Watkins downfield, and made some plays against the Falcons and played a pretty clean sheet for the most part, save for a fumble, I believe. So I think that Jackson comes in, the run game immediately gets 10 times more dynamic because he's one of maybe the Mount Rushmore most dynamic runners in the history of the NFL. He's the most efficient runner that has ever been in the NFL. It's a little different when you're playing quarterback, but you can make an argument for maybe Jamal Charles and a couple other guys, but one of the most efficient runners ever. So it's going to add that much more to your run game. You have Edwards and Dobbins back, and Jackson actually being able to do the things he does, pulling the football and the reads that he makes and the ability to make the wrong read but still be right or manipulate some concepts to make them right is instant, and the big playability. So I think with Jackson, they pretty much get to the point of being able to, probably with Edwards and Dobbins, of scoring 20 points every game. And it feels like what the Ravens as a whole is their philosophy, trading for Roquan Smith, strengthening the spine of their defense, kind of doubling down on tight ends and making sure their offensive line felt a lot more balanced and capable. They want to score 20 and hold you under 20. They want to limit possessions. They want to drain the clock. They want to play in low-scoring affairs. They have the best kicker in the NFL, although they've had some troubles not getting his kicks blocked the last couple of weeks, but they feel that they can play those race to 20 games. And with Lamar Jackson, it feels like is going to make, over the course of 4 red zone trips, 1 or 2 more plays than Tyler Huntley is. Their red zone percentage has gone down from, I think, 52.8% with Jackson converting to, I think they're around 27% with Huntley, which would be the lowest figure in the NFL. So instant in the run game, able to produce a couple more explosive plays in the pass game. The red zone offense looks a little bit better, and you just feel more confident playing in that type of game. And it probably makes you feel like at the end of games, if you're trailing in a 17 to 14 game or a 17 to 13, that you have a better shot at the end to actually push the ball downfield in the 2-minute drill, get into field goal range, or go punch a ball in with a player like Lamar Jackson. And with the Steelers coming to town, the last time Jackson played the Steelers, if he does play in this one, would be exciting, because the last time we saw them, he scored a game-tying touchdown to Sammy Watkins as kind of time was running out there, I think with like 4 seconds left, and then they go for 2, don't end up getting it. So proving exactly that. He can go win at the end of a game, I think, a lot more confidently than Tyler Huntley.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that Lamar Jackson gives you, and they're missing him right now in multiple aspects. You talked about the red zone offense, pushing the ball on the field, which is also really big. But Spencer, do you feel like Tyler Huntley, if we don't see Lamar until the playoffs, do you feel like Tyler Huntley can go out there and get the Ravens 2 wins, both in that high leverage game against the Steelers, but also if the Ravens win that one, what would be a must win for the division against Cincinnati?
No, I don't think he can. I don't think that the Ravens pass game will be competent enough against the Bengals without Lamar Jackson. Maybe against the Steelers, they already played that close kind of game where the Steelers come storming back. I think asking your backup quarterback to go play kind of your 2 fiercest divisional opponents back-to-back weeks with all the pressure on is just not going to – I'm not betting my money on that to happen. I think that's pretty long odds there. I would put that, maybe plus 600 to happen. So I think that it's a tough task to get one win with Huntley against the Steelers when Huntley already beat the Steelers. Having your backup quarterback sweep your rival is pretty crazy. But the Ravens really did throw Kenny Pickett for a loop. It felt like, did Kenny Pickett hit his head? Yes. Felt like maybe he didn't really have a concussion. He was not going through his reads effectively. In all of the dropbacks Pickett was in, it felt like he had no clue what he was looking at. He scrambled several times, was rolling out, trying to, find that sideline kind of little check down or that little sideline flat read as he was running. I think that he was quite confused. So maybe this week, I do think the Ravens have a chance. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers will win. They are destined to not have a losing season. So I think they'll continue to try and float on and push for a final playoff spot. But I don't think that Huntley on the road against the Bengals has a chance.
That Bengals team has hit their stride over the last month or so, a little more than that. So it will be a tall task for Huntley, especially you got some solid defenders over there in Cincinnati. I mean, DJ Reader's been one of the best defensive linemen in the league this year, so that's going to be a test for the Ravens run game. But I think he can beat Pittsburgh, and how sweet it would be if the Ravens were to give Mike Tomlin his first losing season as a member of that Pittsburgh organization. But still, regardless, I think Jackson has a chance to beat both those teams, and Huntley, he has a chance too, but the chance just goes up so much if you have Lamar in there as opposed to Tyler Huntley. But we talked a bit about Lamar's injury situation. Now we're going to talk a bit in the second segment about some future talk with this organization and Lamar Jackson. So be sure to stay tuned for our second segment. Still a ton to dive into here on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode of Locked On Ravens is sponsored by Ultimate Football GM, and I'm really excited to tell you about our new partner and sponsor of today's episode in the mobile game, Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise, well, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for things like hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, and navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft in all the ups and downs of a season. All in this challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. The Locked On hosts are doing a little competition. You can do the same with your friends, and you can do it with your family as well. The Locked On Ravens listeners get 100% free boost to the franchise when using promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure to check it out today. Download the game. Just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on any app store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. We return our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. Spencer, we've talked at length for many months about Lamar Jackson and his contract situation. We're not going to necessarily dive into contract talk, but there have been multiple national media outlets talking about not if the Ravens should move on from Lamar Jackson, but if Lamar Jackson should look to move on from the Ravens. And I know we talked a couple weeks ago about if the Ravens failed Lamar Jackson by not putting weapons around him. But there are multiple different situations where this offseason, either the Ravens could agree to this extension with him and everything is kind of set in stone, or they could look to franchise tag him or even trade him. So the question, Spencer, do you think that with everything that's gone on throughout the last couple of years with Lamar Jackson and this offense, that Lamar should be looking to move on from the organization that I think has built this team around him so far over the course of these first couple of years?
It's a tough question to answer. I'm not Lamar Jackson ultimately, but it felt like they had a good thing going. And hey, that 2020 season, that weird COVID season, they're a pretty good football team until Ronnie Stanley went down. It felt like there was a pretty cataclysmic domino effect following that, which, hey, led to them winning his first playoff game, then going to go play in a frigid game against Buffalo, against our Leslie Frazier defense, and not having the offensive line to get the job done. So 2021, they draft Rashad Bateman. In my opinion, has shown everything needed to see up to his injury to be a dynamic player. But what happens? All of the injuries. So I think we're tired of talking about the injuries, but they don't go away just because we're tired of talking about them. At the end of the day, though, none of that really matters. It feels like he wants to go where he's going to get paid what he wants to get paid. I think that is the ultimate driving factor, and we can dissect these theories or rumors or things we think we pick up on in a Ravens Wired video or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, he has a number that he wants, and it's not different from, going into a car dealership. You have a number in mind, they have a number in mind. And if that number isn't met on, both, but where both sides are willing to go, then it's not a deal. That's the quintessential aspect of it. So it feels like the only reason Lamar Jackson hasn't signed an extension to this point is because of Deshaun Watson's deal. And Steve Bisciotti was pretty candid and pretty open at the owners' meetings about the way he felt about Watson's deal, that it was an extreme jump, that it was an outlier, that he wasn't prepared for it. And, I always think it's funny getting into, the millionaires versus billionaires. And when you're not talking about $1 or $2 million, you're talking about someone that's, made $30 million already plus endorsements and has $250 million on the line, and versus the billionaire. And it's like the stigma around the billionaire versus the underdog 20-something-year-old millionaire. But at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson has a number in mind. It's bigger than Kyler Murray's number. It's probably much closer to Deshaun Watson's number than not, if not higher than Deshaun Watson's number. The Ravens weren't prepared for that situation. I think they felt under control. They felt that they had the right number, the right mindset, the right timeline. Then that monkey wrench got thrown in. They waited a little bit too long. They treaded a little too lightly. They walked on eggshells because Jackson doesn't have traditional representation. I think there's a common misconception that his mother is his agent. That is not the case. He has a legal team. He also worked through the NFLPA. It was a cute story and everything, and was a smart deal for Jackson as a rookie, considering that the slots were pretty much accounted for in the new NFL bargaining agreement with the NFLPA. But he has a legal team. He has advisors. He has a financial team, and it's not ones that are certified to work with an NFL team. So they have to work directly with Lamar Jackson or with the NFLPA, and it has made this process post Deshaun Watson pretty, feels pretty stale, and that they've kind of gotten to a point where they don't want to offend Jackson and tell him maybe that, hey, we don't think you're worth what that is or what Deshaun Watson was paid, but they don't want to say that to him. So, there's been rumors, there's been all these kinds of things, but Jay Glazer is usually a somewhat reputable source on these kinds of things, said that they blew Kyler Murray's deal out of the water, around $200 million guaranteed, and wasn't enough. And then there's rumors that they were trying to work towards a 6-year, $250 million deal and trying to figure out guarantees that would meet his demands, but give them as much wiggle room as possible. Feels like Sashi Brown was brought in that mindset as well, coming from the NBA, where the contracts are guaranteed, but there is still wiggle room in the language and in the way there's player options, team options, mechanisms of that nature. And so I feel like they're still working. The sentiment from the Ravens is that they are, what is the language they always say? It's going to get done. We're working on it. We're working to get it done. There's never been any other sentiment other than we're working to get it done. So it feels like they will eventually cave. Lamar Jackson has all of the leverage. I would go as far as to say is that if he would have held out instead of participating in training camp, he would already have an extension, I believe. So if they franchise tag him and he holds out, I think it will put their feet to the fire, and they'll start to go into panic mode a little bit. So I do believe it does get done. Has there been enough around Lamar Jackson? No, but why is that? Is it a failure? No, the one position that the Ravens decided to go cheap on, as opposed to trading the Bears traded the 33rd pick and a 5th round pick to get 1.5 seasons of, a maybe top 50 wide receiver in Chase Claypool. And the Ravens instead chose to send a 2nd round pick to go get what they view as probably a top 5 or top 10 linebacker in Roquan Smith. So the wide receiver market is super inflated, takes $27 million a year and a 1st round pick or multiple, day 1 and early day 2 picks for a Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams. They tried to go cheap at that one position and ended up with a disgruntled Hollywood Brown, who it was an obscure pick that they asked Lamar Jackson about and probably should have gone for a bigger, more capable, stronger presence in an A.J. Brown or a DK Metcalf or a Deebo Samuel. They wanted Hollywood Brown. Guys like Mel Kiper had him as a number 1 receiver anyway, but ends up disgruntled. They draft Rashad Bateman, who generates 2 50-plus yard touchdowns in the first 2 games of this season, and then breaks his foot and is out for the year. In the 4th game he does. In the 3rd game, didn't get a ton of targets, but he made a game-winning play against the Patriots, even on a 30-yard catch where he made a defender miss and got 20 yards after the catch, flipped the field. So I think that our tune changes if they could just get a little injury luck, and they haven't had any. So I think people are tired of that. No one wants to hear about it, but they drafted receivers, and that's the one area they went cheap. They rebuilt their offensive line after Orlando Brown demanded a trade. They've just dealt with a lot of strange situations. And I know that Eric DeCosta has gone on the record and saying in, quote unquote, in my old age, I think he said this on the Lounge podcast, the Baltimore Ravens podcast with Ryan Mink and Garrett Downing, that in my old age, I don't really feel the need to try to get a player to stay who doesn't want to be here. And I feel like I just want to meet their wishes as opposed to trying to fight to make them want to stay. So, whether that's the right philosophy or not, they trade Hollywood Brown, they pick a center, they solidify the line, they have Rashad Bateman, and here we are.
Yeah, I know that there's so much that goes into something like this, and I know the Ravens have they when they took Lamar Jackson in 2018, they knew they would have to build something around him. I know it's all situational with a lot of these guys. Where is Lamar Jackson in the right situation? I know was Josh Allen in the right situation in Buffalo? Obviously, that's worked out as well. But for this whole thing, there's so much that you can talk about with guarantees, with roster construction, with length, and everything that goes into it, where it's still such a fluid situation at this point. But Spencer, we do have a mailbag question here. It comes from Brendan Sean. I know you talked about that Ravens Wired video and people kind of taking stuff from it. Well, he asked, the team shared a picture of Gus the Bus on Christmas without Lamar Jackson. Are reading into that at all, or just a snapshot of who's been healthy enough to play the last few weeks? So Spencer, do you feel like the Ravens are sending messages kind of secretly under the radar here, or is there literally nothing to read into with this stuff?
It just, it feels like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are on it, Roquan Smith, Mark Andrews, they played on Christmas Eve and produced a win. And it's like everything has to be about Lamar Jackson. Every conversation has to be about wide receiver and Lamar Jackson. And it's just exhausting. It's just heaven forbid the NFL team lets any of their other players, other than the guy who won MVP 3 years ago, be on a Christmas card that they post on Twitter.
It's interesting because I know teams have done it before. Right? Teams have left guys off of graphics, left guys off of season ticket packages in all sports, but I don't think in this situation it's the Ravens saying, well, Lamar's not going to be here next year, so we're just going to put other guys on the Christmas card or something like that. So I agree with you, Spencer. I think at the end of the day, this thing does get done with Lamar. He's the heart and soul of this team. He deserves every penny of what he gets. And again, we've talked about it. Has he been perfect this season? No. Is he struggled in certain areas? Sure. But at the same time, there is something to say about if they were to let him go. It's like the mystery box theory where I think it's from Family Guy. I can't remember exactly, but it's like Peter has the option to get a boat or a mystery box that could be a boat. And he takes the mystery box and it's like 2 tickets to some comedy club or something. So for the Ravens, they could have Lamar Jackson or they could reset. And I know there's a lot that goes into either having a quarterback on a $250 million contract versus a quarterback on a rookie contract. And you want to reset that scale. But that rookie quarterback could be something like Lamar Jackson. And again, there's nothing, I think Lamar Jackson is one of his own, but he could be a talent, or he could be someone who sets your franchise back a couple years. You got to go through the process again. There's something to having a franchise quarterback. So I know that, again, a lot of people, if the Ravens were to let him walk or trade him or whatever it would be, if he's not in the Ravens uniform, people would view that as, I think, an all-time fumble moving forward for many, many, many years to come. But coming up in our final segment, we'll be reviewing the Atlanta game with Baltimore, how they're able to beat the Falcons 17-9. So be sure to stay tuned. Still lots to talk about on the show. But first, this episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcast that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find an episode from the league available as a bonus episode on Locked On NFL. Narrated by Super Bowl champion and legendary smack talker Richard Sherman and sports broadcaster and rising star Taylor Rooks. The League is an 8-part docuseries about the most bizarre, inspirational, and unlikely stories connected to America's favorite sport, pro football. You won't want to miss these untold stories spanning from the 1940s through the present. Head over to Locked On NFL for a bonus episode of The League. Catch the full series wherever you get your podcasts. Available now. Audible, get in the game. We're back. Rounding out Locked On Ravens with Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown, I am Kevin Ostreicher. And Spencer, Baltimore picks up their elusive 10th win of the season, 17-9 over Atlanta. Clinched the playoffs. They actually, even if they lost, they would have clinched, but they get the loss in the Patriots, the loss by the Jets as well. Was this game how you thought it was going to go?
Yeah, it was relatively. The Falcons had struggled to defend power and gap schemes defensively, and Gus Edwards had himself quite a day. J.K. Dobbins didn't quite have the mega efficient day that he's had, but he still averaged 5 yards a clip. He only had, one of his carries go for 14 yards as his long, but chewed them up. Tyler Huntley, I think this was really probably the most or second most impressive performance Tyler Huntley's had as a Raven. Thought he made relatively good decisions for the most part. He did miss a couple opportunities down in the red zone. Felt like he neglected to let Mark Andrews have a chance one-on-one in man coverage in some situations in the red zone that resulted in Andrews getting pretty fired up and kind of demanding, hey, get me the ball. I'm cooking this guy. He's been beating up A.J. Terrell all day, but makes a nice throw to Andrews isolated one-on-one against A.J. Terrell. I think Andrews is starting to look like himself. He didn't have a huge stat game. If you're a fantasy player, you're disappointed in him, but really was putting the work on A.J. Terrell quite a bit. Looked explosive, looked sudden, looked all the way back. I feel like the knee and the shoulder are somewhat behind him. Wouldn't be surprised to see him have a cleanup procedure or operation of some sort in the offseason, but he was really a driving force as well. Thought that the Ravens offensive line went to work. Morgan Moses, I think, graded out in the high 90s from PFF or low 90s from PFF for what he put in. Pat Ricard had a big day as well. So offensively, yeah, they ran the ball. And the Ravens defense hasn't allowed a touchdown at home since October 23rd. They have been aces at home. They have been, and really, I think maybe the play of the season was Marlon Humphrey's punch out of Drake London, because with, as you mentioned, Kevin, clinching up a playoff spot, 4th and 2, Drake London had a great day, made some unbelievable catches, mega talented player. I was relatively impressed with Desmond Ridder too, but to go punch that ball out after getting beat just shows the type of competitor and football player that Marlon Humphrey is, and to have the wherewithal after getting beat to go square that up and ensure the tackle still against a really dynamic athlete was so impressive. I think that changed the game. And the Ravens defense really hunkered down in the red zone. The Falcons kind of bit themselves in the butt a couple times. They have a weird intentional grounding, some weird clock management, things of that nature. But the Ravens defense just smothers teams in the red zone at home and keeping teams. I mean, over the last 3 home games, it's been 9, 9, and 3. They've held teams to 7, 8 field goals over the last 3 games at home. So their defense can ride. They can roll. They didn't have Calais Campbell. They didn't have Marcus Peters. And I think the Falcons did a nice job booting Desmond Ridder. Ridder made a couple nice reads through zone. And again, got the ball to Drake London. But they just put the clamps down in the red zone and got out unscathed defensively. And it was a testament to what they can do with a backup quarterback, running the football and playing some good defense.
It's so funny when you're talking about the Ravens run game, J.K. Dobbins averaging 4.9 yards per carry and us saying, it wasn't super efficient. It's like, we're so spoiled with all these, he didn't average 9 yards a carry. That's not a great day. So we've had those where, teams right now are averaging 3.2 yards per carry. So the Ravens run game, super efficient. Again, another good game from them, even though it was Gus Edwards averaging 9, not J.K. Dobbins. This is the second straight week they've had a runner average 9 yards per carry on more than 10 carries, or at least 10 carries. So something there. But I agree, the Ravens defense has been incredible. And I mean, Roquan Smith leads that charge, 15 total tackles. What do you see from him and Patrick Queen in this one?
Man, being at the game as well, Roquan Smith, and this is not a knock on Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen is a quick linebacker. He can run, man. He can run. He can chase. His pursuit is pretty explosive. And what Roquan Smith did several times laterally was haven't seen it in Baltimore since 52 was roaming around through there. He chased down a screen, and it was really peculiar. The Falcons really did keep trying to attack laterally in the run game, and they did have a little bit of success, but it's Ravens have the fastest linebacker duo in football. Both of those guys are dynamic in terms of speed and pursuit speed. So Roquan Smith, the way he's been able to mirror backs, I think the Ravens front has done a good job keeping him clean. And Patrick Queen kind of just being able to be the more aggressive launch player and force player that goes and shoots a gap early and kind of picks his poison and allows Roquan Smith to stay clean because of that, and then just mirror the back and then go take him down. There were some really, really, really explosive plays made by Smith, and he's several times bailed them out in space and been able to go be someone who simply ends plays. And I think what people lost sight of at what Roquan Smith did in Chicago is what a linebacker does. At their core, they end plays. They make tackles. They make stops. They try and wrap you up before you get to the first down marker. And I don't know how many people are better at that right now than Roquan Smith in the NFL. He has been rock solid. He has been on another level since he was acquired by the Ravens. Feels like a perfect fit for this defense. And from what an article in The Athletic said, the Ravens are very much trying to extend him. It is something they want to get done before the end of the season. I'm not sure if that will happen, but wow, Roquan Smith is dynamic, has explosive pursuit speed, and can blitz. They're interchangeable. Patrick Queen and him can go mug, they can go cover, they can go run, they can go hit, all of it. So it's really fun to watch, and that much speed in the middle of your defense, it feels like is the vision that Eric DeCosta has been chasing for quite some time. And to have Kyle Hamilton also be playing at that level as that kind of off-ball Sam, nickel, dime back or whatever it is, has been really fun to watch too. The Ravens just don't get beat laterally. You have to run right at them. And even without Calais Campbell, Travis Jones had a hell of a day. Brent Urban, I think, has been super underappreciated for what he's done maintaining his gap. And Broderick Washington and Justin Madubuike obviously have made dozens of plays at this point in the run game. So it's a really fun combination. And I think Smith and Queen are just exciting to watch. They make plays. They're playmaking linebackers. And while they're not perfect, Queen still will miss tackles and things like that. They will make big impact tackle for losses, sacks, plays on the football, things of that nature that change games.
Yeah, Roquan Smith, he's been everything and more that Baltimore looked for when they acquired him. And obviously, there is a discrepancy in whatever his contract is going to be with a second-round pick, but you want your second-round pick to be Roquan Smith 10 times over. Like, that's just what it is. So I think, again, you got to extend him. You got to get that done if you're the Ravens, but the trade is looking good so far. And Queen, Roquan Smith has elevated Patrick Queen, but it's not like Queen was playing badly before Roquan Smith came in. He was still finding his own, but I think his addition, Roquan Smith's addition, has been great for them just as a whole on this defense. But Spencer, the Ravens get their first wide receiver touchdown since week 3. Is that a sign of things to come for this Ravens offense?
It was nice watching Demarcus Robinson go up and make a play. And it feels like Ravens receivers, while they're not as talented as, 29 of the other 32 NFL teams, you have to still let these guys get an opportunity to go catch some 50-50 balls, to go win, to go make a play. It feels like they've tried to be so safe the way that they get them the ball between zones or, trying to get it right in timing and sitting down. And it feels like they've really just made them play in this little box of, very little margin for error. And to just let a guy go up and make a play in the end zone felt like a big sigh of relief. And while Robinson is an erratic player who, carries the football like a hot dog and, sometimes might not know where he's getting lined up. So 6'2", jump ball guy. He, is super fluid. We've seen the double moves he's run and some of the things he's done after the catch when he's not carrying the football like a hot dog. But he got to go make a play and made it. Sammy Watkins got to go make a play and made it. Made someone miss after the catch. Deshaun Jackson, has quietly made a handful of plays in limited snaps. And Tyler Huntley, people are mad at Greg Roman, and I think rightfully so, for not trying to burn another minute off the clock or force the Falcons to use timeouts. But Deshaun Jackson beat his man. Tyler Huntley tried to go for the throat, and they tried to go hit a 9 route to Deshaun Jackson, go end that game. And it was, just a little bit off. So I think these receivers aren't good enough, but they're better than people give them credit for. And to let them go make plays, and it feels like a guy like James Prochet has had such a tough season. But it's like, if you go watch training camp, you go watch preseason, the guy is incredible in contested catch situations, his ball tracking skills, his hands. I'd love to see him maybe get a few of those chances. And I liked him getting to incorporate himself as a punt returner and just get a feel for the game a little bit. I think that is so imperative for young players to really, especially someone who handles the ball, to just get the ball in their hands a little bit. I think it could help him and translate offensively. Even Andy Isabella running around back there. Didn't get to do a ton, but he's there.
Yeah, Spencer's favorite wide receiver, Andy Isabella. Are you happy you got activated? You finally get to see him on the field?
He made a play on special teams, and I will say that if Tyler Huntley would have, and you saw Andy Isabella, I think in the first quarter, the Ravens ran a veer, and it looked like a true option veer, and Isabella would have walked into the end zone. And I think we do see a Andy Isabella jet sweep touchdown in the vein of Michael Campanaro. Michael Campanaro was a Steeler killer, and I think we'll see Andy Isabella make a big play in this one.
Man, that would be chef's kiss for you after everything earlier in the year when he got signed to that practice squad. But let's talk about that Pittsburgh game, previewing it real quick. What do you feel like is going to go on? Even at Lamar Jackson versus Tyler Huntley, we talked a bit about that. But what about the rest of the guys?
I think that it was an awesome performance from Morgan Moses, and I think Morgan Moses, who was hurt, got carted off the field in Week 6 against the Giants. Had a game kind of losing play against the Bills at the goal line. The Ravens are at the 2, try and run, I think, like a blast. And lets kind of, younger, unheralded player swim him, gets out over his skis, gets swum, and turns into a 3-yard loss. So I think for the struggles, for him getting carted off the field, some of the things he had early in the season, in zone concepts, kind of not getting out of his getting out of his stance quick enough. Off the blocks is what I was going for in 5 seconds of terrible radio. But I digress. Has turned into a killer in the run game, driving guys off the football. I think that we kind of overrate pulling a little bit because it's like a 6'5+, 310-pound plus offensive lineman typically getting a running head start into a smaller player in a phone booth. But he has been really successful pulling. The way he's been able to be aware of how to actually seal and contort his body to make sure that the back doesn't need to deviate his path at all has been really impressive. He's been moving. He's been hunting guys down in space. And, has been solid in pass protection. I think he's PFF's number 3 offensive tackle. He's the number 1 offensive tackle with a minimum of 400 snaps in the second half of the NFL season this year. He's given up 4 total pressures, 0 sacks, and 0 quarterback hits, basically in the second half of the season. So super dynamic for what the Ravens had last year in Alejandro Villanueva. It's a shame that, Morgan Moses became available 15 days later instead of Villanueva, but it's a godsend to have a player like that on a 3-year, $15 million deal. If you go to Over the Cap, who does valuations, which is kind of an aggregate of PFF grade, statistical production, snaps played, and a few other factors, they value him as a $14 million right tackle this season. And his cap hits $3 million. So incredible value there. The leadership, you hear John Harbaugh talking about him. He had a hell of a game, sprung so many runs on Saturday. And I think that the Ravens hit a home run with Morgan Moses. He's a fit in the culture. He's a fit in personality. He's a fit schematically. And it's a pleasure watching him right now.
So against the Steelers, him going up against TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, you have Ronnie Stanley too. Is that one of the bigger matchups in that game?
Definitely. It kind of starts there and ends there as well. If you let TJ Watt make that big play, the Steelers will, he'll go kick the door down and do that whole thing, even if it's kind of like he put a hand on your back, but he'll go do that entire thing. And the Steelers feed off of his energy. He is their leader. He is their marquee player. So yeah, absolutely. And Morgan Moses played pretty well against him, but especially if Tyler Huntley's back there, you can't let a backup quarterback start feeling the pressure of a star pass rusher, or else, things will spiral. Poor decisions will be made, things of that nature. So Highsmith, I think, is one of the most underrated players in the NFL. He has a double-digit sack season. He is also dynamic. He is also every bit as dangerous of a pass rusher. So I think that kind of really is where you want to look in this matchup. You kind of want to see if Marlon Humphrey can rebound after George Pickens got the best of him a couple times. Deontay Johnson got him once. And then you want to go look at the Ravens tackles against the Steelers outside linebackers or edge rushers.
Yeah, it'll be a tough matchup. Divisional, the Ravens-Steelers games always come down to the wire, absolutely. But Spencer, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for hopping on. Tell people what you're working on that Money Down series. You're working hard.
We are continuing to turn out some content there. Didn't get one last week because of the holidays there, but we'll be back on that grind. The Money Down's looking for it, looking for everything film. Ravens for Dummies, BaltimoreBeatdown.com. You can find my podcast, the Baltimore Beatdown Podcast, anywhere you get your podcast. Thank you so much for having me on, Kevin, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Go give Kevin 5 stars and reward the man who gives you the best daily Ravens coverage, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Again, a big shout out to Spencer for talking Ravens with me, Lamar Jackson, that Falcons game, and more. Such great insights from him always. So be sure to check out his work, writing, podcasting, Twitter, etc. He does a great job all around. A couple of Ravens notes. The Ravens actually waived Isaiah Mack, and he was claimed off of waivers by the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Ravens likely did this to be able to get Anthony Brown onto the 53-man because he no longer has any practice squad call-ups, I believe. They also signed Josh Bynes to their practice squad, and Ed Reed gets a college football head coaching opportunity. So congratulations to Ed Reed, and hopefully that works out for him. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. We are so close, under 10 away at the time of this recording, to 3,000 subscribers. I appreciate all the support. Be sure to follow along in audio form to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're daily, so Shames show both audio and video form. But again, thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, I'll be diving into more Ravens content, beginning to preview that Ravens and Steelers Week 17 matchup. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.